Hello everybody, this is Odd Job Entertainment bringing you another video. And today we're going to talk about rarity. No, not that one. We're going to talk about armor rarity in Star Citizen. Because it gives me a bit of pause. There's been a lot of recent announcements, and I think I generally agree with most of them, but this one makes me a little nervous. There's a lot of things to consider. First, what does rarity even mean? It's used in a lot of games to various levels of success. I refer to Destiny 2 a lot in my videos, and here's no exception. Though I do want to be clear, I don't want Star Citizen to be Destiny, it's just a point of comparison. With that said, the very first time I played Destiny 2 was way back at the initial launch with the Red War campaign. That was my first exposure as well to their rarity system, and I think that was my best experience with it. If there's any other fellow Destiny veterans in the comments, they can probably confirm my experience. You start off earning common gear, then you start to get uncommon and rare gear sprinkled in. Towards the end of the campaign, you feel like Macklemore wearing all legendary gear, and you've probably got your first exotic. But that's where the good feelings about rarity end. Once you've completed the campaign, the word rarity really loses all meaning. Just about everything you earn from that point forward will be, quote, legendary gear. Your focus then turns to grinding out RNG stats attributed to each piece, and ironically the blue rare gear becomes much more rare than legendary gear. It's just not as good, so when it does come up it's instant fodder for materials, but it's actually more rare than the, I guess, ultra rare stuff that you get. It's like if you were to walk out into your front yard and there's a ton of diamonds, but all you really want is just a not shiny rock. And this highlights one very important aspect of a rarity system. When done well, it should, emphasis on the should there, it should play a continual role influencing how players set up their kit. It should continue to push and pull players into different pieces of equipment to adapt to the mission at hand. This is one area that I feel is really lacking in Destiny 2, as it largely boils down to maxing out a couple stats that are always good, and the diversity of loadouts comes from getting those same stats to be good and match up well with the exotic gear that you're using. For instance, there's never a situation where I don't want max recovery or max resilience, especially as a Titan player. So how can Star Citizen approach this aspect? Well, one way is to introduce durability. This is already in the plan, so it really shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. But durability means that there will be a constant accruing cost to keep your gear in working order. Even if you do get a loadout that works well in every situation, which should not be possible, you'll still need to work with crafting mechanics and repair to keep that gear working. And you'll probably want a few backup sets in case your durability gets too low and you need to switch to go get materials for the repair job. One game that does this pretty well is Minecraft. The armor progression in Minecraft does have a rarity system, even if it doesn't come with color-coded tiles to indicate it. You start off with leather, then iron, maybe gold, and diamond. And more recently, there's even higher tier ores for crafting armor. The risk of losing said armor also increases as you step up in those tiers. You may lose it outright if durability gets low or if you die, and it's going to pose a challenge to replace it at that point. When you account for enchantments, a piece of armor that isn't particularly special on its own becomes very difficult to replace in the event of a loss. And this is all perfect for armor rarity, and while enchantments per se wouldn't fit well in Star Citizen, the variation of the concept could work very well. We've talked about armor diversity in a previous video. To recap it briefly here, we need a lot more stats for points of comparison for armor in-game. There ought to be sets that do better against energy weapons, and vice versa for ballistic. With the lightning weapons in-game, that's another damage type that could offer room for customization. Other stats include mobility, cargo capacity, heat capacity and dissipation, insulation, radioactivity resistance, and many more. And we've seen a lot of these hinted at in the most recent sitcom. If crafting goes the direction I hope it does, these are all things that could be tweaked to tune armor exactly the way you want it. And while it's not magic, these adaptations serve the same role as enchantments do in Minecraft. Just like those enchantments, Logically, only so much stat tweaking can be supported by a single piece of armor, right? So the set that does really well against lightning damage might not be great for ballistic protection. And crafting brings up another point of consideration. Do you allow players to craft top tier armor? I think there's arguments for both directions here, and I don't know what's the right decision. On one hand, if players are unable to craft legendary gear, then the reputation with factions gains much more importance. The opposite is also true. If players can craft gear that is better than faction gear, then there's less value in grinding reputation for a particular faction. Your crafting system becomes more important, and by extension, so does your player-to-player market. What if players can craft legendary gear by acquiring blueprints based on reputation, but some specific modifications require an NPC or god level of skill to implement? I think this strikes a nice balance and makes it so that crafting and reputation both have a part to play. Your factions could have unique pieces that cannot be crafted, that offer a highly specialized stat bonus impossible to get otherwise, but players can still craft all kinds of more general top shelf gear. And expanding on the crafting aspect, how do players then craft legendary gear? If it needs to be rare, then the materials need to be difficult to find, dangerous to collect, or high value, right? So these are all things to consider when you realize that we plan on having crafting in the game at some point. How does that tie in with legendary rarity armor sets? Now, supposing that you have your perfect loadout, under what conditions should you lose it, and how can other players acquire it? This is another spot where it gets really tricky. Take Tarkov, for instance. As a new player, you have nothing, and you're going into the same arena as Cheeto Dust Sweats with top tier gear. If you do manage to kill one of them, you instantly increase your standard of living, right? You now have instant access to everything they had on them, and that can include everything from massive backpacks to thermal sights and much more. But due to the extreme disadvantage, it's pretty hard to pull off. The same also applies in Minecraft, but to a much lesser extent. Now in the current Star Citizen meta, that is exactly what can happen today. New player gets the drop on another player, and all of a sudden they've jumped ahead in progress. My question is, should it be that way? Tarkov has regular resets that bring everyone down to earth again, but towards the end of a season, you run out of things to grind for. Star Citizen has a similar situation right now with database resets, but it's not going to be that way forever. At some point, your progress, good or bad, will be persistent. And if new players in Star Citizen are able to bypass a lot of the grind by killing better equipped players, they do cheat themselves as well. They'll run into whatever content drought awaits them all that much faster. So I think it's comparable to playing a game with cheats enabled. Sure, it's fun for a bit, but after you've one-tapped all of Montana in Far Cry, it gets boring doing it again. And I found that for this exact reason, when I got the Tomb Raider games well after their release, I had to give myself rules that I would not touch the DLC weapons that was bundled until I had completed the campaign. Otherwise, it was just going to be too easy and I wouldn't actually enjoy the game. As you can see, my reasoning for locking the gear down a bit has nothing to do with me not wanting to lose stuff, and everything to do with maintaining the integrity of the experience for other players, particularly newer players. Though admittedly, I am a bit of a Care Bear in recovery. I used to get real steamed when I lost my stuff, but I'm coming around to see the light, and I'm starting to recognize the value in losing. So what about the player that just died with all their fancy kit?
And it's gone.
Unless the other player left all of it behind and the down player is able to go and retrieve it, it should be considered gone, lost. This is for much the same reason as before. Losing your masterpiece loadout means you get to make it again. You still have something to grind for at that point. You probably have a high reputation with various faction vendors, so it's probably not too difficult to get a reasonably competitive loadout working again. But it should still pose a challenge to get the same quality of gear you had before. Your options for getting to that may include taking out other players with similar kits as before. And that keeps PvP alive and well at the top levels. But how do you make it so veteran players can gank each other but maintain the grind for new players? Well, gear level is one way to do it. And this could tie into reputation, and that may actually be a pretty good way of enforcing the systems I'm about to describe. Think of a game like Elden Ring. If you're not properly matched to a particular piece of gear, you'll need to grind out some levels to use that piece effectively. You might need to increase your strength to use those two-hand weapons better. And reputation adds some flavor here as well. If a new player rolls up to the Ninetales base wearing legendary gear that they didn't earn, they might be pretty pissed, just like when Leonard rolls up in the clothes of Natalie's dead boyfriend driving his car. The Ninetales may attack on sight if they know the kit you're wearing doesn't belong to you. Durability has a role to play here as well. If you just shot another player in the head, it doesn't make sense that their helmet is in pristine condition once you loot it, right? In Tarkov and Minecraft, damage chips away at the durability. Tarkov is much more strict in this aspect, and a looted piece of kit may work, but only just barely. I think the same could apply in Star Citizen as well. Sure, you took the nice stuff off another player, but you'll need rare commodities to get it looking nice again. You're probably going to lose the armor if you go chasing those materials without repairing it first, so the newer player now has a bit of a catch-22. They can wear the nice stuff, not be able to use it to its full potential because they lack the levels, and risk losing it all again if they are too brazen in gathering their repair materials. Factions won't respect the armor they wear because they know you don't deserve it yet, and depending on how egregious the mismatch is, they may even be more hostile to you. So maybe it's best to hold on to the nice kit, grind out your levels in other loadouts, and then break it back out again when you can wear it properly. I think there's a lot of ways these various methods could be mixed and matched together to ensure the new player still gets to experience a level of grinding, while also ensuring the veteran still feels lost and has to re-enter the armor grind and get to have new experiences as well. That should be the overall goal for armor rarity. You should feel lost when you lose something valuable, and you should have something to work towards when you're just starting out. And going back to what rarity itself means, I think it needs to have a literal application. If a piece of gear has the legendary title attached to it, it should be rare that you actually run into it. Looking at Destiny, that's a great example of how not to do it. Nearly every piece of kit you earn is legendary, so none of it really is. The only rarity you actually care about is exotics. Battle Royales also do this very poorly. Is a legendary weapon really legendary when there's a high likelihood of always finding at least one in a round? In Warzone in particular, is a legendary weapon ever good enough that you would trade your loadout for it? Usually no. Does that actually mean it was legendary to begin with? Again, I'd argue no. For the loot grind to have any real value in a persistent multiplayer game like Star Citizen, I contend that legendary needs to actually mean legendary. It should be hard to find, demanding to use, and heartbreaking to lose. Your loadout should reflect a large investment of time, tuning it to your playstyle and representative of your preparation for a mission. Losing your gear when you had legendaries equipped should mean that you're coming in scorched earth on the player or NPC that dropped you to get it back. If you hear a shot whiz by your head, your heart should jump into your throat because you do not want to die. As it currently stands, armor is not nearly that valuable in Star Citizen, and I really hope that that changes. To recap, rarity needs to mean something in Star Citizen. We've talked about various ways to achieve that, from durability, stat variety, literal rarity, and craftability. If you feel like there's something I missed, feel free to leave a comment below. I'm excited to see what you think. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the video, so like, share, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube things, let me know what you think down below, and until next time, this is Odd Job Entertainment, signing off.